Welcome back to another episode of Menopause from a Man. Today we have a really special episode. It is another guest episode, and today we have Debra Atkinson. She is a renowned fitness expert. You're going to see why. She's a health coach, author, and speaker specializing in fitness and wellness for women over 50. Now, you're going to find out that Debra and I have a weird amount of similarities that keep this entire conversation extremely fun from beginning to end. But at the same time, you're going to learn exactly what you need in order to unlock the best version of yourself at the age of 40, 50, 60, or beyond. Now, as the founder of Flipping 50, Debra provides comprehensive programs that focus on strength training, hormonal balance, and overall holistic health. With a master's degree in exercise science, Debra combines personal experience and scientific research to deliver effective, age-positive fitness solutions. She's also the author of You Still Got It, Girl, and hosts popular workshops and events along with the Flipping 50 podcast, which I had the privilege of joining her on. Debra's mission is to inspire midlife women to embrace their strength and live their healthiest lives, proving that age is a no-brainer to fitness and well-being. So without further ado, help me in welcoming Miss Debra Atkinson. Welcome to Menopause from a Man with your host, Joe Hoye, where my goal is to educate, empower, and equip you with the tools that you need in order to make the second half of your life the best half of your life. If you enjoy this show, make sure you subscribe to catch all future episodes, and please share it with a friend that you think will enjoy it as well. Now on to the show. Debra, welcome to Menopause from a Man. Why don't we just start right off the bat with learning about who you are, what it is you do, and your background?
Wow. Okay. In a nutshell, let's see. From a really small town in the Midwest, I have peed in a cornfield. I haven't dated second cousins, but it was close.
Close.
And yeah, and great place to be from. And yet I've lived since in Boulder and in Phoenix, where I currently am. So I've been around and realized the great place it was to grow up. I'll tell you that. Um, and I never grew up thinking, okay, menopause fitness, that's it. That's what I want to do. I started off thinking a lot of things like we all did. Wanted to be a vet, really wanted to be Jane Goodall and work with chimps because I wanted one desperately. And then I realized my idea of camping was the Marriott, and that wasn't going to work very well. So I actually walked around as a child with a sketch pad and paint or pencils. I mean, that was when we went to the mall, that's where I wanted to go, is the art store. So for a long, long time, I thought I was going to be a graphic designer and, loved photography, loved it all. And about halfway through my college career, I realized, gosh, I'd started walking, which became jogging, which became running the summer before college. And all of a sudden, I felt like I didn't fit. Graphic design students stayed up all night, smoked and drank to get their projects done. And I'm like, I don't fit in here, So I stuck one foot in physical education, which is what it was called then. And at the end of the semester, I was sure that I wanted to change. And never ever had I considered that. Having come from a small town, graphic design was out there actually compared to what most people chose, something, pretty steady and that your parents understood what they were paying for, because mine certainly did not. You're majoring in what? Aerobics? Like, is there money in that? So it was an interesting flip, but for 30 years, as I worked with people, I was raised by older parents and older siblings and realized that I was constantly matched with older adults, the alumni, that were at the university exercise clinic. I was given to them, and actually it worked really well. I enjoyed them. They enjoyed me. I knew how to create rapport. And so I was doing research long before I ever knew this was going to be my niche. And about 30 years into it, I was single again. My son was going off to college, but I was feeling this itch, like I wanted to have a bigger reach, and felt a responsibility to give back to the fitness industry. And I really wanted to help level up those trainers and instructors, people who wanted to own gyms who were terrible at marketing and sales because they kept saying, "I hate it. I hate it." And, they wouldn't embrace what it is and how they could do it, without being sleazy and salesy. And to everybody listening, we need the good ones. We need to keep the good ones, and you need to be able to find the good ones and sort out what's marketing and what's really a good message. So I wanted them to be able to do that. And I don't know why, but for some reason that had always come naturally to me. It certainly wasn't that I had that demonstration, but I really geeked out on how can we help people make the right decision for themselves, not just make them buy something, but make them start what they want to do anyway and help them do it. And I quit everything. Stopped working at a university. I stopped my working in the private sector as, running gyms, consulting, and doing
Hmm.
personal training programs. And I just said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this online so I can have a bigger reach, take them the success we've had teaching trainers how to market and sell. And then immediately I was like, wait a minute. If all I'm doing is talking marketing and sales, but I'm not doing it myself, in about 5 minutes, I'm just somebody who says, do this. I'm not, but you should you should do that. And so I realized I have to start and work with a private customer as well at the same time and say, here's what I'm doing that's working. And so I said, okay, I'm going to pick a niche. And I spoke to the one that I'd been hearing from the most. That was about the moment I was 49, and that meant baby boomers were anywhere I'm the tail end. So they were, between 49 and 69, and they were all going through it, and their doctors were saying, well, it's just menopause. Welcome to menopause. Like, this is it. This is what you get. It's like no better expectations. You're going to have to settle for this was the answer they were getting, and they weren't accepting it. So I said, okay, I'm going to help them, and we're going to, work on it from the fitness, from the, positive nutrition choices, lifestyle choices they can make. So as I did that, Flipping 50 took off. The trainers and the health coaches that niche a little bit further behind. We're actually coming full circle, as of 2018, and we're helping trainers and coaches again use what we've used. But that's kind of how I got where I am personally. You
Wow.
could you could say I'm a slow learner. Um, so at 49, I still felt really good, and I think you have to look at a woman in her 40s and we know she's in perimenopause. I was
Hmm.
one of the lucky ones, right? So I didn't have a lot of hot flashes and night sweats. I look back and I think, oh, I did have a couple. It just was such a blip and then it was
Hmm.
gone that I thought maybe I'm getting sick, it was kind of like the day I was, in labor, I was like, I wonder what this is. I think I'm sick. I'm like, oh, it's 9 months. Maybe it's a baby. Who knows? Yeah. So, I thought I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to skate through this. My healthy lifestyle has really paid off.
I feel
And
something coming here.
yeah, yeah. Well, then I turned 56. And that year, not only was June 12 months, so that's really my menopause transition was that. But right before Christmas, the previous Christmas, my septic tank backed up in the house I was
Mm.
renting. So it took about 3 to 4 months to mitigate it. Being winter and in the mountains was really hard to, and the entire floor got ripped out. It was a mess, but I was exposed to mold that entire time. And I kept getting sick after they were done. And I'm like, I don't get sick. Like I don't
Mhm.
get sick 3 times in 5 weeks. This isn't right. So I tested it, found that there was indeed still mold, and the landlord's response to me was, I think you should move. I've already spent as much as I'm going to spend. I'm like, okay. And by the way, they're not obligated to tell anybody or disclose that. So it's up to you if you're a buyer to check that
Do
out
your
and have a
research.
really good inspector and somebody come do that specifically. So I needed to find a place to move in about 5 weeks when my lease was up. And meanwhile, I was hosting a retreat in about 4.5 weeks, and it was just like, it was a tense time. So I landed in Phoenix, but that year I was also, it had been intended to be the fittest year of my life. So that's really what I was calling it. I had started, all right, I'm going to test. I tested at the University of Colorado. I was going back regularly to retest, do my VO2, and publicize it, right?
Wow.
And train for an Ironman. And this was my eighth. So it wasn't new, but it was first time while in, menopause, knowing that's about where I was. So all of that, the move, the mold, the menopause hit, training for an Ironman, I knew it was going south by, August, September. I knew that the training was not having the effect that it was supposed to have. And I was like, I'm either gonna, leave a very expensive backpack sitting at a starting line, or I'm gonna go ahead and go, knowing I'm gonna do some damage here. And I did. I gained about 14 to 16 pounds of what I call my cortisol pack.
Hmm.
You don't wish for that. A lot of inflammation, more so probably than fat, but some fat due to the excess cortisol, just all of it was too much. And I could not turn that around. Not myself. I was doing all the things that I would have done with a coaching client, the lifestyle changes, the nutrition, the diet, the really backing off of exercise, rest and restore. And so that's when I was like, oh, Uncle, I'm going to need probably some hormone therapy to pull this back together. So that's my story. You can be a really slow learner, or you can get it the first time.
Wow.
I didn't have to go through that dark tunnel, but I did.
That was hell of a story. And it's really interesting. I'm going to go back to the very first things that you said.
Yeah.
And truly, Deborah, I have never met somebody who shared their story and had so many similarities to me. I think
Hmm.
aside from the fact that you're over 50 and you're a woman, we have a lot going on. I didn't know I was going to get into menopause fitness. I wanted to be a vet. I fell in love with graphic
Well,
design in high school.
oh my gosh.
When I became a personal trainer, my mom said, Joe, I don't think there's a lot of money in personal training. And I'm from a small town. Like, how could
Oh,
that? You
wow.
hit so many nails on the head. That's wild.
My brother from another mother, huh?
I think that's what just happened. Um, but another thing you said is you came across the three M's: the move, the mold, the menopause, all at
Yeah.
once. And that did a number on your
Mm-hmm.
body due
Mm-hmm.
to a cortisol response.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I'm all about, and actually I know you're all about because I guessed it on your podcast, is keeping things really simple. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that when we start to talk about hormones, we have a tendency to go off the rails and overcomplicate it because it excites us
Mm-hmm.
and we like it. But that doesn't mean our audience follows. So, can we dive into cortisol, but keep it simple so that our
Mm-hmm.
listeners can really learn and take away from this?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So it's a good guy, bad guy hormone, right? I think it gets a bad rap for being the stress hormone, but we're all going to have stress. So you can think of it as it helps us cope with stress. It's what causes us to stand up, pick up, and do what has to be done. The problem in our society is we've got this chronic level of stress, like the over connectedness. I mean, how many can say your phone is within arm's reach, or you're panicking right now because it's not? Stay with us, everybody. So it is for an energy hormone as well. It's what we use to, if there's an emergency, we get that adrenaline rush, and that is a release of cortisol in our system so that we can do what has to be done. When we exercise, we're almost imposing that. When you start that warm up, you're ramping up. Cortisol is what we use for energy. So it's both. But the problem is, if we're pushing both of those systems constantly, you can see how there will probably be a problem with something being depleted. Now, it may or may not be that your body can't promote as much cortisol. It may be simply that the rest of your systems, get tired.
Mhm. And so, what do we do about that? Because as you explained,
Yeah.
cortisol has its benefits. Like it helps
Yeah.
us
Oh, yeah.
in our day to day life, it helps us in our
Hmm.
exercise and to adapt in a positive way. But at some point, it also starts to hurt us. So, when it does start to hurt us, what do we do? Or what do you suggest our
Mm.
ladies over 40 do?
Yeah, and there's probably 2 sets of ladies out there. So some are experiencing too low cortisol. They actually wake up in the morning and they don't actually wake up. They feel kind of hungover without remembering that they had any fun, so they didn't earn that. And they struggle to keep energy up during the day or get it up even for things that are important to them. So there is that. And then there's the opposite where you're just wired and constantly tired and maybe go to sleep and you're staring at the ceiling. You are exhausted but can't pull it together. So I think the first thing is to look at which of those is you, because there might be two slightly different strategies that I would recommend. Um, but for the most, I mean, number one rule at Flipping 50 is restore before more. So many times, some of the things, the side effects of cortisol is the way you know that you might have it is you're gaining weight, especially depositing it around the belly. And the initial logical response for any grown ass woman is I'm going to exercise harder and more and get that off. And that's going to contribute to more cortisol and more of the problem. And it is so counterintuitive. And this is, I think, where we struggle. I'm hoping that if a young woman who's 20 or 30 is hearing this or getting shared this by an older mentor, that she gets it early and
Hmm.
she won't struggle the way maybe 50 something, 60 something nows do, because we learned from our parents who were, war generation people. The harder you work, the better results you'll get. And we got that message so clearly.
Yeah, I love that. I find that number one, I agree with you. Restore before more is
Mm,
that's our mantra. We just say it differently.
mm,
We like to do less and eat more, which
mhm,
is
mhm,
very contrary to what a lot of people think, but
mhm,
it's all in the mindset. And it's very easy, Deborah, to not exercise as much. And it's very easy to enjoy more food.
mhm,
But in your mind, maybe not, because like you said, you're used to doing so much. So, how do
mhm.
you flip that
Yeah.
switch mentally to allow yourself to actually restore before you do more?
Yeah, we usually substitute, kind of like a smoker. I mean, you don't say, just don't smoke. Boom. You give them carrot sticks or you give them knitting needles, right? You give them
Hmm.
something to do to fill the fingertips, or those times when you're in the car, what are you going to do? There's gum, or you're right after dinner, the times when you'd smoke. So similarly with triggers, when that exercise time comes, that urge comes, generally putting something in there. So maybe we're doing yoga, at least in order to satisfy that need to do something that won't be as damaging and potentially will be restorative. Now, someone hearing that out there is thinking hot yoga, right? Power yoga,
There's the
and it,
more.
yeah, right, exactly. Like I can always find the edge, but it's, learning just to groove in and trust the system. Sometimes you have to be willing to say, look, what I'm doing right now isn't working. I'm going to commit to something for short term, even though it's awkward, it's difficult. Look behind you. You've done hard things in your life, and say, if, after 3 days or 1 week, it's not better, I can always go back to what's not working now.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I don't know if you saw my face when you said that, but like,
Yeah.
if what you're doing isn't working, stop doing what's not working and
Right.
maybe try something that you've seen create the desired result in
Mm,
people that look like you. I
mhm,
couldn't agree more.
mm,
So, yes, the exercise we really need to dial back.
mhm,
In terms of nutrition, what do we do there to
mm.
help with, I don't know, rebellious cortisol levels?
Like you said, we too, you still got a girl, the After 50 Fitness Formula for Women book that I wrote in 2016, I think. Um, the tagline is, exercise less and eat more. It's the opposite of the dogma and meant to get attention and make you say, what? What? But truly, we've been doing this in the past month or two, educating our community all over again, because for some reason, just there's this surge of create a caloric deficit, but increase your protein and you will lose weight. And I just am like, wait a minute. Somebody here has to speak up and say, a lot of these women, I'd say 90% of the women I come across who are in midlife and older have been in a caloric deficit for months, if not years. And so trying to eat even less than that, we've just slammed on the brakes to your metabolism. And now we're also saying, they're wanting to exercise more because that'll accelerate it further. We're just like sitting in the car in our garage with our feet pushed as hard as possible on both the gas and the accelerator. Not going to work very well.
Yeah, and if it does work, let's just go through the possibility of it working. For anyone not watching, I just did little quotes with my hand.
Yeah.
If you are in a calorie deficit, you're not losing weight, you're doing everything right on paper, and then you slash your calories more,
Hmm.
you know what, Deborah, like they could lose weight, but
Hmm.
we have to understand that weight loss isn't really the goal, is it?
Yeah, right. Fat loss, right. And for some women, it's potentially not even that. I mean, they be in their own optimal body composition, but feeling fluffy, padding in the
Mhm.
cushions, and it's inflammation, and that too. We're making that bump up, we're boosting it with the wrong kind of exercise, over exercise. And there's no quota. Just anticipating the question that a listener might have to that, like, what's too much? Even if you listed for me what you're doing right now, I would have a hard time telling you, is that too much for you based on not knowing, what's been normal for you? When have you felt good? What were you doing? What's your history? While we're recording this, we're in the Olympics. I mean, what Simone Biles does for normal, is probably, 3 weeks worth for the rest of us. So you've got to look at how do you turn it down in terms of exercise and increase it as far as your intake goes? And that generally is across the board. It's not just
Mhm.
increase protein alone. I think increasing the protein alone will often decrease the panic level because it's there's a satiety level associated with it, and yet less likely that you're really truly going to overeat because you get so full, and you're probably going to see an increased energy level, which will feel good. And if we can get you just taking that one step, it feels good to feel good, probably you'll be willing to do a little bit more of that.
I love that. You just mentioned two things that I think are going to trip people up a little bit. Number one,
Hmm.
they could be doing the wrong kind of exercise.
Yeah.
Can we just break down what's right and what's wrong?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so over exercise, number one, I mean, just looking at over exercise for you and any moment you're in, it's going to change, so you could be on a roll and a lot of women in midlife are dealing with this. You're a caregiver for any number of people. And, the added stress load of that will alone determine you don't need the same amount of stress that you were getting from your exercise necessarily. So you shouldn't just be trying to check that box and get the workout blindly. You may need to back off on the time or the intensity or the duration. Maybe you're fine with the intensity, but just less duration or frequency per week will help you. um, my mom was passing, and those last few months were, we knew it was happening, but it's very stressful. And I found I could do high intensity interval training, and I needed to purge some of that adrenaline and the emotion. And I couldn't go for long walks anymore. Someone else might be
Hmm.
the opposite. So, what is right for you, you might have to try on and make sure it's a fit. But you'll be sleeping better, you'll be calmer, more present if it's the right thing. If you're exhausted afterward, have to take a nap, or just can't function, it's probably not the right thing.
Yeah, and we find that some ladies inside of our community or even our coaching program, they'll tell me, look, Joe, I just don't like exercise at all.
Right.
And I know I have my own thoughts about that, but this isn't my episode. So, what do you think is true when someone says they
Mm.
don't like exercise at all?
I think they haven't found the right one. I think that I'm not somebody who believes that you or I can just say, well, I like yoga. That's what I do for exercise. The older we get, we have to acknowledge we have bones, we have muscle, and we have brains that we need to attend
Mhm.
to if we're going to live really well in that second half. So, your muscle and your bone will need stimulus that most likely comes from resistance training. Now, you don't have to do a lot of it, just need to do some quality of it. And we're looking for the minimum viable physical activity of that type that you do so that it makes the things you do love more pleasant, more fun, easier, enjoyable. So looking for, are you looking for exercise that you do solo? Are you looking for exercise that you do in a group? What do you prefer? To quiet, to music, indoors or outdoors. There's so many more options. But I think it's that you potentially haven't had the right exposure. Never ever would I have thought I would be a physical activity major in college because I didn't have a real pleasant sports experience in high school. I wish I'd have had a coach that was slightly different, just a little bit more encouraging, the willingness to look at, other ways to approach other than punishment, and
Mhm.
lapse and the way we thought about it. Um, but I think we can be that, you and I, for someone else is just opening up the door to a new opportunity and experience.
I love that. Um, we have bones, we have brains, we have muscles.
Mm,
They all need attending to.
mhm,
That is
mhm,
so true. Um, Another thing you just said is, I wish I had a coach that was slightly different,
mm,
which tells me you did have a coach, but that
mm,
coach wasn't for you. And that doesn't
mhm,
mean that that coach wasn't for anyone. It just
mm,
means you two didn't jive. I know that we have a lot of people that have maybe had a coach before and they didn't have a great experience. But does that mean that there's
mm,
no coach out there for them? Or what does
mm,
that mean?
mm. So good. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think the more we know ourselves, which is a blessing in getting older. And you mentioned I'm flipping 50. Yes, actually, I'm flipping 60. And there's something even more freeing about that. It's like, I don't really care what you think. I'm going to do it anyway because I have a shorter amount of time here on this planet than you do. So there's that. But I think when you know yourself better, you know immediately, you know, this is not going to work for me or this is going to work for me. And I think there's a whole lot of things that you get from a coach. Sometimes it's social. I think it just shouldn't all be social, right? So it should be ideally strategy, technique, somebody to pull you back when you need pulling back and somebody to kick you, where when you need that. And if you've got a coach that you trust, you're okay with them doing that because that's why you hired them in the first place. Like call me when I'm doing BS.
Mhm.
When I'm operating on limiting beliefs, I want you to call me on that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because a coach does need to be there socially and to know about you as a person and form a relationship. But at the same
Mhm.
time, our job as a coach can be a double edged sword because
Mm.
we might need to be that person that says the thing that you don't want to hear.
Mhm.
And that might actually be the sign of a great coach.
Mhm. Yeah, agree. And I think too, there is do you need somebody who is much more encouraging and more of a cheerleader? I mean, know that about yourself. And, on the flip side, I've had people come to me and say, I need somebody who's going to be really tough on me because I tend to, go the easy way if I can. I won't work as hard. And if you push me, I will respond. So if you know yourself, even in things like that, and a trainer ideally or a good coach may pull that out of you, so that
Mhm.
they're asking. And I think there's two ways to think about coaches. Joe, I don't know if this is your experience or not, but I think some coaches will say, well, here's this, and that's the way I coach. Does that work for you? And other coaches are able to be chameleon a little bit and kind of ebb and flow with the client and give them what they need. So I think the latter, tells you you've got a probably more experienced coach who doesn't just my way or the highway. This is the way it's going to be if you're working with me. It's actually, we're about getting you, where you want to go with the kind of encouragement or nudging or pushing that you need.
I couldn't agree more with that. The longer I do this, the more I become a chameleon. And it's like, hey,
Yeah.
I don't think there's a diet that's right. I think that
Hmm.
the right diet is the one that works for you. As long as you're hitting your nutritional needs and you're seeing your results and you're healthy, that's it. And if the way I talk to you doesn't work, let me change. And I think the right
Hmm.
coach doesn't need to ask you those questions. They simply observe it and they change automatically for you.
Hmm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
But you know what? Sometimes people don't even have the resources to have a coach at this moment. And I think since you and I have both done this for a while, we
Mm-hmm.
recognize that. And our goal as a coach, like if we're really in this for the right reason, is to just help. And so for anyone that might not be ready for coaching mentally, physically, or resource wise, what would you tell our
Hmm.
audience of women 40 plus? Like, what are the top one, two, three things that they need to be doing to start seeing results as simply as possible?
Yeah, great question. And to that as well, you've got a podcast, I've got a podcast. I think that's a great resource for finding for free your, a voice, the voice that you can listen to that resonates with you, that feels like this is what I needed today, maybe not what I wanted today, but it was also said in a way that I can accept this. I need to listen.
Mhm.
Um I think everybody needs to be moving on a daily basis. Even those who may be low in cortisol need to find ways to move on a daily basis. We need the movement in exchange for the sedentary lifestyle that so many of us have. In contemporary living, I don't know about you, but I'm sitting down right now, right? So it's like,
Yep.
at some point I've got to build in a break and make sure that I just get up and move a little bit today because it's one of those days. Um, so walking is generally my reference, but I also
Mhm.
know somebody's got an ankle, a knee, or a hip, and walking can't be a possibility. Substitute your thing. So maybe it's a bicycle or an elliptical for you, or a rowing machine, or it's something else, or it's dancing. But you're looking for ways to move to offset sedentary life every single day. That's just the base of all of our pyramids every single day. I used to not be such a fan of pedometers before they were all, around our wrist and our fingers because I thought, this is putting the emphasis on the wrong thing. And now I think we're back to it. And I think
Mhm.
that especially for women in menopause, a lot of times it's a huge eye opener that doing that as opposed to over exercising for 30 or 60 or more minutes a day can actually be one of the most gate opening things to helping you burn fat again and feel good again. Um, so that number one, and resistance training, just getting a very simple, easy to follow total body routine that you do 2 or 3 times a week. And I'd start with two always, just to make sure you're recovering completely between before you offer that third one. But if you have 10 minutes, not including warm up or cool down, but you can do a total body workout. Now you're going to just skim the edges, but you can do one. And if you've got 15, even better. If you've got 20, that can be a pretty good workout and change your energy level within a few weeks. And then last but not least, get breathless a few times a week if you can. And there are, 85-year-olds who will swear by that's what keeps them young, and it's not like you don't have to get so organized as to say hit and exactly how many seconds you should be working and how many you should recover. Just go up a flight of stairs and get breathless and then recover and do that on the regular and realize that's not a bad thing. Doing it on purpose is a good thing.
I love that. Wow, that was great. Pedometers. I remember when
Yeah.
my mom had a pedometer and she would aim for this 15, 16,000 steps a day because, like you said, they were putting this belief in your head of like, well, I got this little step counter on my
Hmm.
belt loop. I got to get as many as I can. And now everyone that I talk to thinks that they're a failure if they don't hit their 10K steps a day. What do you think about that?
I think it's a little crazy.
Me too.
I think that based on the research, I think there's a lot to be said for hitting like 6 to 7,000
Mhm.
seems to be like this is a real sweet spot. And then hey, if you have extra energy and time or you have a job that has you on your feet, you're going to get those steps. Fantastic. But if you do that in lieu of resistance training,
Mm,
and getting some agility training or high intensity interval training where you do get breathless, you're shortchanging yourself by putting all those eggs in that one basket. So we need some variety. As we age, power is going to get really important. So occasionally you got to do things faster. You got to jump. We need reaction skills so that we don't fall.
mhm.
Everybody's worried about a fracture, forgetting that, if we don't fall down, we won't get one. So could we just work on balance and agility a little bit more? And that's not built in often to just walking and doing things slowly and controlled. We have to really think about that.
I really like that thought, and I actually haven't, to be honest with you, thought about it from, well, if we fall, we can prevent a fracture because of bone density. Yeah, we all
Hmm.
think about that. I have not thought about it from the perspective of, well, what if we just don't fall?
Yeah.
And how can we make that
Hmm.
as small of a risk as possible? That's good.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. And so then let's get into resistance training. This is a fun one because I'm 30 years old. Resistance training is one of my favorite things to do in the world. So because of
Hmm.
that, I'm a pretty muscular guy. And so when
Mm.
I tell our community of ladies, 40 plus guys, you got to work out, you got to lift weights,
Yeah.
none of them like to hear it from me because they think they're going to look like me. Uh, let's talk about that.
Good luck with that. It's so funny that if on the flip side we were setting out to look like Joe, in 2 or 3 weeks, we would be so angry. It's like, I'm not getting anywhere. But I mean, if you
Hmm.
just think of it that way. But number 1, I'm gonna give you the science, but everybody has heard this. Even when you were at the peak of your hormone production, it was very, very hard for women to gain lean muscle. When you hear about, bodybuilders and figure competitors, yes, of course they lift weights, but do you have any idea how much time they spend and how dedicated they are to eating and eating and eating for that, like throughout the day? That's their part-time job right there. So they spend up to, hour and a half, 2 hours a day, many days out of the week in order to get the adequate stimulus. And they're taking, additional levels of protein before and after and all day after that. So they're taking a lot of extra measures to do so. But let's say you're postmenopausal or even perimenopausal, you don't have what you did have. So now it's even harder. I mean, we would be doing great if we could add lean muscle. If you lose lean muscle because you've dieted and you lose 5 pounds, but two of it was muscle, you're going to be hard pressed and have to work hard to get those 2 pounds back. But I'm hoping that everybody has a smart scale that's telling them their absolute measure of muscle, their skeletal muscle, not a percentage, because that's a slippery slope, but absolute. If you have 56 pounds of lean muscle tissue today, you never, ever want to lose that real estate.
Never. No, that's good. And gosh, one thing that I want to hit on is, I'm sure this is true for you as well, but most of the ladies that come to us, they're not wanting to step on stage. They're not wanting to be a
Yeah.
competitor. They're wanting to slim down their midsection, lose a little bit of fat around their tricep area, or
Hmm.
just maybe lose 50 pounds. And so the combination of wanting to lose weight and having that as a goal,
Hmm.
and then being afraid of gaining muscle,
Mm.
it's not going to happen because we have to understand that gaining muscle in large amounts requires a calorie surplus. And to
Yeah.
lose weight and to reach your goal, you're going to be living in a calorie deficit. So you're
Mhm.
not going to do that. All you're doing is combating the
Mhm.
muscle loss that you're getting at 40, 50, 60 years old. Yeah, that was a
Mhm.
great point.
And just maybe we should unpack this a little because I think this too is shocking. And this conversation that recently we've been having about if you've been living in a caloric deficit for so very long, and you have 50 pounds to lose or more. It wasn't until a client of mine, and I've talked about her many times. She's totally open and wants to help anybody who helps or is helped by her story. But she was eating 800 to 1,000 calories when we met. She probably needed, just for her basal metabolism, 1,400, and she was exercising 2 to 4 hours a day. So her need was probably closer to 3,000 calories.
Hmm.
And so look at that deficit. All she was doing is saying, conserve, conserve, don't burn calories, even though she was trying to walk and burn calories. She was fighting her body the whole time. So until she at least doubled her calories, and we halved the exercise she was doing, she didn't lose weight. So by eating more in some cases, if you're really, really too far below, you have to take your foot off the brake by doing that and turn that metabolism back on slowly. So, and I know that's something that makes a lot of women nervous if they've dieted forever, and that is the way they know, even though every piece of evidence we have tells you it's not working, you'll still hold on to it. So we know you're out there. You're not alone in that thinking. But if you will trust yourself and your body, the human body is really so amazing. It will kick back in. That metabolism will come back. Your body just has to have a minute to adjust and trust that you're going to continue to do this on a regular basis. And it knows then I don't need to put this into storage. We can start using this for energy.
Yeah. You mentioned that this client's BMR, her basal metabolic rate, was probably
Yeah.
1,400 calories.
Mhm.
That's before she was eating,
Exercising.
digesting,
Yeah.
thinking, focusing, doing laundry,
Mhm.
walking to her front door, and that's
Mhm.
before she was exercising.
Right.
And so, do you think that no, let me rephrase that. Do you have clients that are eating 1,200 calories, 1,000 calories, 1,400 calories, and should be eating that much, or is that rare for you?
I don't think there's almost any adult grown ass woman who makes decisions and uses her brain during the day that should be eating that little. I
Yeah.
mean, I take that back. I mean, if you're 4'8", and you're very small, that might be the case. But you're probably not a very active woman at that. So I think the most of us want to be active. I mean, we want to be energetic and having fun. I think maybe if you are at a place where you don't have energy, you're thinking, I don't want to do that. That's hard. That sounds hard. But when it becomes fun again to move and live in your body, that's a whole different ball game. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And there is that 1% out there that is maybe 5'1", 5 foot, a little bit shorter,
Yeah.
and they're already pretty small. They're not
Hmm.
very active. And for you, maybe eating 1,400 calories is right.
Hmm.
But for everyone else listening, if you don't fit that exact description, that's not for you. I mean, Deborah,
Hmm.
let's use you. How many calories do you eat a day?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I only very rarely will do a snapshot like that. I don't like counting. I don't like counting calories. I don't like
Mm,
counting points. What I will count is my protein. I'll do a spot check on that. And every once in a while, I will do a spot check on I think I'm doing and maintaining okay. Am I? But, I think we all have to keep ourselves honest and look at, is this reality or is this just what I think?
mhm.
So I'm probably 2,500 just easily, and if I'm doing training, I have to make myself eat more. I think and it's an interesting phenomenon, but sometimes when I'm doing more training, I can be less hungry.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just a stress state. Again,
Yeah.
going back to
Yeah.
cortisol. You said something that I want to pull out that I'm not sure everybody would have picked up on, but you
Yeah.
do have a good grasp on your calories and your protein, but you don't
Hmm.
track them every day. As a matter of fact, you rarely
Hmm.
track them by the sounds of it. And
Hmm.
the same is true for me.
Hmm.
But I think that you and I both got there because at some point in our life, we did track them.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah. I think probably as uh, a college co-ed in physical education, and I will say that most probably fitness instructors, trainers have done this or flirted with this. Not all, but I was tracking everything. I mean, I could tell you the calorie count and how much vitamin D were in things. I was a
Mhm.
true geek. That's been 40 years. So, a little further away from it. But yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it was a great point.
It's a skill, right? And it's somewhere
Mhm,
where I want to get all of
mhm,
our clients. I want them to have that, and I wouldn't say as extreme as you or I were, but get to an extreme of being cognizant of your calories, your protein, your carbs,
mm,
your fat, knowing what most general foods contain. And
mhm,
then from there, having the ability to dial back because you have the understanding of what food contains what and how your body feels when it's getting what it needs.
mhm. Yeah. Great, great, great point. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think now so much I'm paying so much more attention to what's the effect on not just the food, which makes everything a little bit more available. Like there's no, you can't have that food, but it's eating in a certain sequence to,
Hmm.
look at what kind of an impact is this going to have on my blood sugar.
What is that sequence? That's a really good point.
Yeah, well, this is AKA thanks to some of the research from the glucose goddess, by the way, but carbs last. So there's a reason why there's dessert last, y'all. But it's true for your sweet potatoes too, and it's true. When you go to the Italian restaurant or the Mexican restaurant, you could ask them to take that bread and that chip basket away at least until you're indulging in the meal. Is a smarter decision because if you eat the carbs first on an empty stomach, your blood sugar will rise much, much more. The difference is 75% difference spike in your blood sugar if you eat the carbs first versus last. Same meal, same foodstuffs. That's that's worth the ROI.
I would say so. You're still getting
Yeah.
the carbs. So
Yeah.
if you're eating your carbs last,
Hmm.
what are you eating first?
You can go one of two ways, and I think the jury is still out on this. So a lot of people will say, women tell me anyway, I don't think I could eat that much protein. I get too full. Then for
Hmm,
them, I would say eat the protein first
smart.
to make sure you get it. But others will say, and glucose goddess is on this page as well. She's like, eat the veggies first. Like if you're having asparagus, do that because something about the fibrosity of
Hmm.
those foods coat your gut. So you're not again going to absorb those carbs as much. And it's just your gut is going to be happier coming in and digesting all the rest of the meal. So it's going to work better for you. But I would say either veggies, then protein, and then your carbs last. Gets tricky if you're having a bowl of chili, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more with you on knowing yourself. Are you someone that has a protein goal and it's hard to hit that goal? If
Hmm.
so, let's go
Hmm.
for your protein first. If you're
Hmm.
nailing that protein goal every day, eat your greens, then your protein, then your carbs, and dessert counts as carbs. We're not saying you can't have dessert.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. Deborah, this was an amazing and fast 45 minutes.
Wasn't it?
Thank,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. For everyone that wants to spend a little bit more time with you, number one, where can they find you? And number two, is there anything that you'd like to share with or offer the audience?
Absolutely. So find me at flipping50.com. That's all words spelled out, no numbers. On social, we're at flipping50 TV, as in television, flipping 50 TV. That's on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, just everywhere. So you don't have to remember it. And the Flipping 50 podcast is a great place to start. You'll find that on the website. We share that too everywhere else, but it's where you download your podcast.
Mhm.
And, if you're not started yet, you're somebody who's out there still floating, we have what we call a 5-day flip. And
Mm.
that's just 5 very short exercise videos to convince you you do have time, you do have energy, and it just takes a little bit to get started moving. to feel better and to realize you can start making this a habit.
I love that. Thank you so much
You're
for the
welcome.
last 45 minutes, and we'll talk soon. I just wanted to say thank you for tuning into today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation as well as found it valuable. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and please leave me a review. It's going to help with two massive things. It's going to help me, number one, reach more women like you so that we can change more lives. And it's also going to help me get bigger and better guests onto the show so that I can help to change your life in a bigger and better way. Be sure to check the show notes for any special offers from myself or our guest today, as well as where to spend time with today's guest. And until next time, stay healthy and keep thriving.